All right, so day 4, here we come. We have Karis Kimmel Murray with us today, which I am really excited about. So at the very first day of the summit, do you remember when I told all of you to not be um, just someone who's watching all of this go by? I said be a participator. So you guys have been doing so great in the Facebook group, participating and telling us about your takeaways. And I have loved seeing how you've been putting stuff into practice already, and you have been seeing changes in your family, which is so exciting. So way to be here with us today. This is so exciting. Like I said before, parenting is your most important job. Like, you are the impactor, you are the model, which is really exciting, but also scary. So like, you being here is really, really amazing. So let's unlock some more parenting with Karis Kimmel Murray today. And I'm just going to read her bio, and then I'll let her take it away for today. All right, so Karis Kimmel Murray is the author of Grace-Based Discipline and creative director of Family Matters, a ministry whose internationally hosted parenting and marriage events, radio and television broadcasts, articles, videos, websites, and best-selling books written by Karis's parents and Family Matters founders Dr. Tim and Darcy Kimmel. Grace-based parenting and grace-filled marriage have been used by God to transform tens of thousands of families into instruments of his restoration and reformation. Karis writes and speaks for Family Matters as a voice to the next generation of parents. Karis is co-host of the Family Matters Minute, a nationally syndicated 1-minute radio segment heard by millions of listeners every weekday. Karis lives in Scottsdale, Arizona, with her husband, Mike, her 2 teenage daughters, and a ragamuffin menagerie of pets. So here is Karis Kimmel Murray, and I have a couple questions for you. So what is your menagerie of pets?
Okay. Right now I have 2 dogs, 4 outdoor working cats, who are my ratters and take care of any rodents. And because I have also 6 chickens, and I like to think that I'm Lori Ingalls Wilder, living on the prairie and just having my farm and stuff. I also love to garden. And so I have my little, I don't know, I think of it as like a little urban farm in the middle of Scottsdale, which is a suburb. So, yeah.
That's awesome.
And I was going to say, and my girls are, they're 16 and 17 years old. So.
Okay. Nice. And then my other question is, so you've got like Karis Kimmel Murray. What do people like? What's the one name that they normally like call you? You know, like I'm a teacher, and all the other teachers call me Sarvey instead of Christine. I don't know. I'd rather have Christine, but you know what I mean? Like, what do they call you?
Well, okay. Most people just call me Karis, and
okay.
Or Karis Murray is how I go. My writer name is Kimmel Murray, right?
Okay.
Yeah, and my nieces and nephews call me Kiki, so
Aunt
Kiki. So, and then my daughter's friends all call me Mama Murray. So.
Okay, awesome.
So you can call me Mama Murray too if you want.
So I am going to let you just take it away today. Okay. Karis is speaking about grace-based discipline, so here she goes.
Okay. Well, hi friends, thanks for joining me today, and I hope that today finds you a little bit of rest and peace, an opportunity to watch this great webinar program that Christine has put on for us. And so what I'm going to talk to you about today is discipline, which is kind of one of our most important jobs as parents. And the talk I'm going to give today is a talk that I often give to parents of all ages of kids, but it's especially poignant for parents of toddlers. And the name of this talk is 6 Quick Tips to Avoid Screwing Up Your Kids, which I know is every parent's worst fear. We just think that someday our kids are going to be laying on a shrink's couch, tracing all of their problems back to us. And honestly, you're not going to mess them up. You're not too much. I mean, you'll mess them up a little bit. Didn't all of our parents mess us up at least a little bit, even the best parents? But the truth is, you don't have to be perfect parents. You just have to be good enough grace-based parents, right? And, you know, kids are resilient. And the fact that you're here listening to all of this great information that Christine has brought together for you, that you're participating, already tells me that you're a great parent. So I just want to put your fears to rest. You're not going to mess up your kids. But I get the fact that that is all of our worst fears. And very often, I think that fear cripples us and keeps us stuck. It keeps us doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. And that's the definition of insanity, right? So we need to sometimes reframe our thinking and reform our habits in order to really make the impact that we want to make on our kids. Because there's no question that we love our kids, right? Except that sometimes the ways that we express that love may not be being received by our kids the way we want it to be received, even when they're as young as toddlers. I have teenagers, which is sort of the second phase of toddler parenting. It's, you know, everybody dreads teenagers, like, oh, teenagers are the worst. And we have this script that we go through and we talk about, you know, oh my gosh, wait till they're teenagers. And I, you know, long ago, even back when they were toddlers, I thought, you know what? I don't want to talk that way about my kids. I don't want them to hear me speak those prophecies over them, because that's what our words very often are. Our words are like prophecies. Okay, they have an impact, and what we expect from our kids and the way that we talk about them, they internalize that, and often they live up to those expectations, those prophecies. And so why not speak a more redemptive prophecy over our kids at any age that they are? And there's at least the off chance that they're going to believe those positive prophecies about themselves and make those things true, right? And you can do this at any phase of parenting, but there's no question that parenting toddlers is a very challenging phase of parenting. And you're going to come up against these challenges at every sort of age and stage with them, but they're going to change and they're going to evolve with time. As our kids grow, as their brain develops, as they hit different milestones and transition periods in their life, those are where the challenges happen. And so what I'm going to share today is just a little bit, and I hope that if it helps you, that you'll look into some more of our resources at Family Matters. And I'm sure Christine will tell you all about how you can get a hold of those things, but this is just the tip of the iceberg. I talk in my book a lot about childhood development and that process. I honestly think every parent should be required to take a child development class. I think that would be a great thing for, you know, hospitals to offer for parents, because we forget how much they're growing and changing and learning every day. And a lot of the time when you don't know what to expect, you have expectations of them that are either unrealistic, that they simply can't meet. And also we forget that our kids are little people. Like, I know that sounds weird, but we forget that they're little individual human beings that are going to grow up to be adults someday. And we're adults, and, you know, we don't like to be told what to do and how to do it. We don't like to be told where we're going to go every minute of every day, what we're going to wear, when we're going to sleep, when we're going to wake, what we're going to eat, how much we're going to eat. I mean, really, and I get that we have to, you know, do those things for our kids when they're little, but I think when we reframe our thinking and we remember these are little people who have their own mind and they are going to grow up to be adults who are going to think and feel all those things like I'm feeling. And it really helps us to not see them as constantly these little disobedient hellions, but individuals who are trying to work out how they relate to the world, right? And when you have a couple of strong-willed kids, it's even more challenging. I have two strong-willed kids, which isn't a surprise to anybody who knows me. I mean, my parents just kind of chuckle because they're like, yeah, you are going to have two strong-willed kids. Both my husband and I are that way, right? And really, if you have a child whose will is stronger than yours, even during some portions of the day, then you have a strong-willed kid, right? And you can't be a weak-willed parent when you have a strong-willed kid. So without further ado, let's get into some of these tips, because I think that what parents of toddlers really need is practical advice that they can put into practice right now. So, you know, the paradox that we face as parents, right, is that we love our children as exactly as they are, but we also love them too much to let them stay that way, right? Our kids cannot remain the way they are right now. We have to do the work to shape them and form them into the kind of adults that are going to do well in the world, right? It's not loving or kind to send kids who don't know, you know, people who don't know how to respond to authority, don't have any self-discipline, have no character. It's not fair to send kids like that out into a world that doesn't suffer fools, right? You know, because the world is cruel and they're not going to get away with anything out there. And so a lot of the time people say to me, well, how do you discipline in a grace-based way? Doesn't grace mean letting people off the hook for things? And no, that's not what grace means. Grace is treating the people that we love the way that God treats us. And God has rules and boundaries in his word that he expects for us to obey, not in order to earn his love. No, he loves us no matter what. That's not what it's about. It's because I love you. I know that these rules and boundaries and expectations are going to ensure joy for you, the greatest joy possible, living by these. And so out of our love for God, we ought to obey. And it's that same relationship we're trying to establish with our kids with discipline. So here's these tips to kind of help you rise to this monumental challenge. My first tip is stop and ask questions, right? When something happens, when there is an event, when there is an eruption, you know, a tantrum, a moment where you're just like, what are you thinking, you know? And that's a question you can ask, but, you know, there was one time, and this is when both of my girls were sort of in the age group that a lot of your kids are now. I think my older one was like 4 and my younger one was 2 or 3, right? They're 20 months apart in age. And I hear my older one just like screaming from the living room, no, Lydia, no, Lydia, no. My older one's name is Riley. Younger one is Lydia. She's screaming, no, Lydia, no, Lydia. And, you know, nothing sort of makes my blood boil like my kids screaming at each other. And that's a moment where like I start to light up. And so I come tearing around the corner and I have, you know, this mama snap that like calls the Kraken, and I'm just like, what are you doing? You know, cut it out, quit yelling at your sister. Well, what I see before, you know, that comes out of my mouth, but before I get around the corner to actually see what's going on, I'm yelling at them, I'm reacting. And, what I actually see is that my daughter Lydia is standing up on our ottoman, and somehow she had gotten a hold of my very sharp sewing scissors. I don't know, right? I was in the other room for 15 seconds, it felt like. She got my sewing scissors. She's holding them up above her head, you know, trying to keep them away from my older daughter, who's trying to get them away from her, right? And so that's why Riley was screaming and yelling at Lydia. She was actually trying to protect her sister, right? I didn't want either of them to be touching the sewing scissors, but in that instance, it's a good example of why we want to stop and ask questions, because we can treat our kids unfairly if we don't truly understand what's going on. And so there's a lot of times where we got to sort of stop what might look like a crime, or what might look like a, you know, bad behavior from our kids might actually be motivated by something that we appreciate, right? I appreciate the fact that she was trying to protect her sister. What, you know, and then in that moment I can say, okay, if anything ever like this ever happens again, come to me and let me help you, because I also don't want you to get hurt, Riley. And you better believe that I like locked those sewing scissors in my safe after that so that they could be used again. But that's just one example of why we need to stop and ask questions. You know, our kids need consequences for, you know, bad behavior, for making bad choices, for disobeying, but context and intentions matter for how we choose those consequences, right? And so that's what I hope you see, is that in order to really give fair, appropriate consequences when they're needed, we have to actually understand what's going on. There was one time that I went to the grocery store, and I'm, you know, I'm super tired because it's like Thursday afternoon and I'm a full-time working mom. And I'm at Walmart, and I'm just, you know, going through pulling stuff off the shelf and, you know, putting it in my cart. And I'm just like, at one point I'm like, yeah, that's everything I need. And then I just pushed my cart full of groceries out to my truck. And as I'm loading them up, I'm like, man, this is super weird that like Walmart doesn't put stuff in bags anymore. You know, it's like kind of like, I guess they're trying to be good for the environment or something like that. And I realized I forgot to check out. I just went into full zombie mode and walked out to my truck with a whole cart full of groceries. And if you had sort of zoomed in on that moment only in my life, I could have been legitimately prosecuted for shoplifting groceries, right?
Yeah.
But of course I was like, oh my gosh, I forgot to check out. And so then I like pushed my cart back into Walmart, and I go to the manager and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Like, I cannot believe that I did this. And I'm freaking out. And he's like, ma'am, it's going to be okay. We'll take you through checkout and pay for your groceries, and then you can go, you know? You know, in that moment, it looked like a crime was being committed. Yeah. And but what was the appropriate thing? Was the appropriate thing in that moment for me to get arrested and go to jail? I mean, you could make a case that you took the groceries, you stole them. Well, no, that wasn't my intention, right? And so there are times like that with our kids, that what it looks like on the surface is not what it actually is. So I think that really leads well then into the second tip. And this is, you know, important at every phase of parenting with our kids, but especially for toddlers, right? Because like I kind of said in the example of my older, you know, the scissors, just the screaming can just sort of light you up, right? Light your fuse. And so this second tip is that we need to respond rather than react. Ideally, we're supposed to respond to our kids' disobedience, rebellion, and immaturity like a cop calmly writing a speeding ticket on a routine traffic stop, right? But only we feel like we're a hostage that our kid has, you know, bound and gagged in the trunk of their car, right? Because it's hard to stay calm when we feel like, and often are, the victim of our kids' bad behavior, right? So, you know, when they do stuff to us on purpose, right? They really do. But a lot of the time, it's not so much that they're doing stuff to us on purpose as much as that we're the ones who sort of bear the brunt of the inconvenience, of the noise, of their emotion that is erupting. And so we've got to figure out how to stay calm and respond rather than react. You know, to kind of go back to writing the ticket example, I think especially for toddler age kids, especially in that age group, you know, when you get pulled over, you could get a warning or you could get the ticket. I think sometimes we give too many warnings, and sometimes it's actually just more loving and easier to just write the ticket. Just write the ticket. Be like, okay, I said don't do this, you did do this, here's the consequence. Rather than don't do that again. If you do this, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to count to 3. Just write the ticket calmly. You know, the police officer is pulling you over, doesn't walk up to your car and, you know, kick the tire and be like, I cannot believe you were going 58 in a 40 mile per hour. Like, they don't, right? But they just go, do you know how fast you were going? Right? And okay, well, thank you for your you know, your license and registration. They go back to their thing, they look you up, and then they write your ticket, right? And that is how we ought to be responding more often to our kids, rather than letting our anger erupt. A really good example of this is, I mentioned I have dogs. I have 2 smaller dogs right now. I've had dogs most of my adult life. And before the dogs that I have now, I had Dalmatians, which are high energy, high strung, super fast dogs. And our one Dalmatian, it was like his goal in life to get out the front door and run away. I don't know what he thought he was going to do when he was out there. Like, I don't know if he had a getaway driver, what was happening, but like, he just wanted to escape all the time. And so we constantly, like, if somebody, oh, I apologize, that's the phone ringing.
That's okay.
If we had somebody come to the door, somebody knocks on the door, we have company over, we're constantly holding this huge, heavy 80-pound dog back. And he's, you know, he's fighting against us. He's trying to get out the door. We're trying to invite people in. It's total chaos. And, you know, and it was like that for his whole life. He lived to be 14. And then when we got our dogs that we have now, I'm like, man, I would really like to not have that problem with these dogs. And so I hired a dog trainer, and she just said, what can I help you with your dogs? What is the one thing you would really, really like? And I said, okay, I would really like my dogs to not run out the front door every time it's open. I don't want to have to chase them down the street. I don't want to have chaos every time somebody knocks on the door or comes over. I want my kids' friends to be able to come and go and forget to shut the door and not lose my dogs every time. And she's like, okay, so what do you want them to do at the door? And I was like, well, I want them to not do anything at the door. I want them to not run out the door. And she's like, well, dogs can't not do anything. They can only do something. So if there's something you don't want them to do, you have to teach them what you want them to do instead. And that was a revelation to me, not just about dogs, but it's true about people too. It's especially true about little people. And so what we worked out with my dogs is that we put a mat by the door, and we basically trained them that every time they, you know, the doorbell rang or it was open, that they would run to that mat and they would get a treat. And so we reinforced this behavior that we wanted. And pretty soon, you know, they would just run and sit on the mat and look at me like, look at me, I'm sitting on my mat. Do I get a treat? You know? And it became, you know, something that was not a problem anymore. And they still have maintained that behavior, even though they don't get a treat every time they sit on the mat. I think they just like knowing what I want them to do instead, because dogs are pleasers. They want to do what you want them to do, right? Unfortunately, our toddlers aren't that way. But I share that story to say that there's two types of reinforcement. There's positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. And you know, if we are constantly saying no, like, no, don't do that. No, don't go there. No, don't touch that. No, don't jump off of that. No, we can't. No, we can't. No, you can't. Right? All day to our kids. And trust me, they're going to keep asking for things that they know you're going to say no to. Because honestly, that you're actually reinforcing that behavior. It's like how I was holding my dog back. That actually holding back of my dog triggers a dog to actually want to push into it. Now that's a dog behavior, not necessarily a physical human behavior, but psychologically, it is actually very similar. When we're constantly living in the negative, when we're constantly saying, no, don't, it's like holding back a dog, and it triggers them to actually want to do it more. And so I would just encourage people, as part of responding, think about what you want your kid to do instead. What are some things that you can say yes to, and try to say yes as often as you can. And that means being inconvenienced a lot of the time for us. And when we're tired and we don't want to, you know, whatever, but it is going to get easier as they grow, right? They are going to get more independent. So you're just in a phase right now where if you can say yes, say yes. You know, think about, what do I want my kid to do in this situation? And give them something that they can do to redirect them towards that, right? Okay, third tip, don't take your kid's behavior personally, even if it is. This is a really hard one. I know, I have teenagers now, right? Don't take their behavior personally, even if it is absolutely personally directed at you to hurt you, right? Our kids will turn on us, honestly, because they know we love them. And it seems counterintuitive, because it seems like such an unloving thing to do, to strike out at the one person who is going to love you no matter what. But honestly, sometimes our kids behave the worst for us because they know that we're the one place that they can put that behavior. It doesn't mean that we don't discipline them. It doesn't mean that we don't give consequences. It doesn't mean any of that stuff. But I think as we sort of have to, you know, emotionally disconnect from how their behavior makes us feel, it helps to understand that they lash out at us because they love us, and they know we love them unconditionally, because there isn't anybody else who loves them unconditionally other than God, right? There's no one else in the world that they can treat that way and expect for that person to love them the way that their parents are going to. So, you know, but when we take behavior personally, here's the flip side of this. When we take their behavior personally, we end up getting defensive. We lash out. We might act in self-protection, right? Out of fear, we might retaliate. And so emotions are important. They tell us important stories about what's going on in our hearts and in the world, but they're not the ones that need to drive the car. Emotions should not necessarily dictate our actions. When we let our emotions drive, they typically end up steering towards what is best for us. And that's not our job as parents. We all know that. It's about what is best for our kids, right? And so we can tend to either overreact or under-respond if we let our emotions drive. So we have to take time to sort of emotionally disconnect from that behavior, not take it personally, so that then we can calmly be like the cop writing a calm speeding ticket, just write the ticket, move on with the day. In my book, which I think you're going to give away a copy of.
Yep.
And it's available everywhere online and in bookstores. But in the like the introduction of the book, not even the first chapter, the very first few pages, I actually teach a psychological sort of tool that you can use to help you remain calm and emotionally disconnect a bit to help you be able to respond rather than react. My brother is a Phoenix firefighter, and they do a lot of de-escalation training because they often are in very terrifying situations, very dangerous situations. And they actually have to sort of retrain their brain not to go into fight or flight mode. Because if you go into fight or flight mode, you can only focus on certain things. You're going to miss a lot of important details. And again, they have to put their safety at risk to sort of lean in to do what needs to be done in whatever emergency situation it is that they're dealing with. And so in talking with him and kind of learning about his training, I thought, man, this could be really useful for parents. So I don't have time to go through that with you, but that would be something to look into in my book. And it's something that you don't need to do anything, you don't need permission. It's just a sort of a quick psychological tool that you can do in the moment, you can do after the fact. So don't take your kids' behavior personally, even if it is. And the main reason why we ought not take our kids' behavior personally, even if it is because God doesn't take our sin personally. It doesn't surprise him. He doesn't feel personal offense that we are sinful, right? He knows we are. He just deals with us in loving discipline, right? And Hebrews 12:6 says the Lord disciplines those he loves. He loves us. That's why he disciplines us. That's why he has rules, boundaries, and limitations that he expects us to obey. Not to gain his love, but because of his love. Fourth tip, focus on the golden rule. I like to talk about it in the sense of the golden rule because I think people of all faith backgrounds, under or no faith, at least sort of understand this concept of do unto others as you would like for them to do unto you, as you would have them do unto you. And that came straight from the mouth of Jesus in the New Testament. And truly that is grace, right? It's how would I want someone to respond to me on my worst day, in one of my worst moments? And give your kid the same amount of grace that you hope somebody would give you. Now, that doesn't mean letting them off the hook for everything that they have done, right? It doesn't mean not having consequences, because that's actually not loving. And I think if we're honest with ourselves, that's not necessarily how we would want to be treated, right? We want people who say, I love you enough to hold you accountable for your choices. And I expect more of you than this, right? If we have just a couple, even as adults, especially as adults, if we have just a couple people in our life like that, that actually do love us enough to say, yeah, that's not who you are. Those are great friends. Those are great mentors. And so we can be that for our kids. But the golden rule helps us, it's essential in helping us decide what to do in tough situations. It requires acting in our kids' best interest, even when it's hard, even when it's inconvenient, even when it's messy. Sometimes grace gives mercy, and that's an option sometimes. But often it gives uncomfortable consequences so that our kids can learn from their mistakes, so that we can learn from our mistakes, right? And so grace-based parents refuse to let their kids grow up to be jerks in a world that doesn't suffer fools, right? It's not loving or kind. So I think, and then that leads into this fifth, tip. But remember, though, that all of this is based on the way that God treats us. He's the ultimate parent. And that's actually the most common metaphor in Scripture that God uses about himself is Father. He calls himself Father. So if he is our Father and we're his children, then really every interaction between God and human beings is a parenting interaction that we can learn from. Number 5 is celebrate imperfect progress. I think our generation of parents especially, we get crippled by perfectionism. You know, that we're the most educated, we have the most access to information, we're the most fast paced. We have social media. We're constantly comparing our real lives to some highlight reel, right? To everybody else's highlight reel, assuming it's real life, even though we all know intellectually it's not, but it has that emotional effect on us. And we just get crippled by feeling like we have to be perfect. But none of us are ever going to be able to do all this perfectly, right? Maybe you've kind of realized as we've been talking today, man, I react. I don't respond. Most of the time I react. I yell, I freak out. And you're feeling bad about that. First of all, release those bad feelings, okay? Because Maya Angelou said, when you know better, you can do better, right? Now you know better, you can do better. But let's say, right now you're reacting, overreacting 9 times out of 10, right? Now that you're conscious of it, now that you've reframed your thinking, maybe that's going to help you in the next few days only overreact maybe 4 times out of 10, right? And over time, that is progress. So don't beat yourself up about the imperfect progress, because those small changes are going to have a huge impact in your relationship with your kids and in the climate of your home. You want a grace-based temperature in your home. If a room is too hot or too cold, it doesn't matter how much good, wonderful stuff is happening. It doesn't matter what great conversations you're having if the room is 27 degrees. You are freezing cold and you can't think. Well, the climate of our home, if it's not based in grace, can feel like that, those temperature extremes. So the good news is you don't need to be perfect parents. You just need to be good enough grace-based parents. And tip number 6 is don't give up. You've got to do this stuff over and over and over and over and over, all day, every day. And just when you think you've got your kids figured out, they're going to change. And you're going to have to figure them out anew. But don't give up. Just because something doesn't instantly work doesn't mean that it isn't going to work. You need to maintain consistency, especially with strong-willed kids, because they're going to keep testing that boundary to see if it's really there. They want to go right up to the boundary to make sure you're serious. Those are the kind of kids that are going to rule the world someday if we can keep them out of prison, right? But you got to stay consistent and don't give up. Reach out for help when you need help. Take time to care for yourself so that you have the emotional bandwidth to do what you have to do as a parent. And I love you guys. And if I can be of any help to you, reach out to me. And thanks for listening today.
Yes, thank you so much. I know that if anyone else is like me, they were keeping notes, and I've got many pages of notes.
Oh,
just so many great things in there. Like it's so great to hear those things coming from you. And I know lots of people are going to be impacted by your message, and that's amazing. So thank you. Like you said, we are, one of the prizes is your book, a signed copy of your book, which is really exciting. Yay! Yep, there it is.
Backwards on the screen, but yeah.
And then the Family Matters is offering a link to download any of the ministry Bible studies for free during the month of July. So that's really exciting. And I have that link that I will post later today with the replay of our video. So can everybody in the chat, can you give Karis some love for everything that she gave us today? Like, that was just amazing. Thank you so much.
And come find me on my podcast too. I co-host a podcast. You can find it anywhere you find your podcast. It's called the Grace-Based Families Podcast.
Perfect.
So talk about all this fun stuff there too.
Yes. Thank you so much again. I really, really appreciate it. So we will see everybody back here tomorrow. And this is tomorrow will be the last day of this week. And then we get a little weekend break. And then we've got 4 days next week. So just hang in there, keep going. Like, this is amazing for your family. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Yep. See ya.
Bye.